Returning now to the fraying relations between France and Turkey. Our international correspondent, Annelise Borges, joins us from Paris. Good evening, Annelise. Just take us back to the beginning and explain how we've now ended up in this situation with Paris and Ankara bitterly falling out.
Well, Oliver, one could say it all started when Emmanuel Macron delivered a midterm speech during which he was supposed to address what would be the next priority of his administration in the next 2 years. The next 2 years is all Emmanuel Macron has left to govern France. During that speech, Emmanuel Macron spoke about Islam being a religion in crisis and spoke about a minority of France's estimated 6 million Muslims wanting to break away from the French Republic because radical Islam places its laws above all other laws. Emmanuel Macron spoke about then the need to tackle what he described as Islamist separatism, and the measures that he announced back then, earlier this year, around midsummer, were included stricter oversight of schooling and control over foreign fundings of mosques. But back then already, some accused Emmanuel Macron of basically trying to repress Islam in France. Of course, this row did not get the dimension, the proportion that got now until the murder of Samuel Paty, that history teacher that was beheaded in the outskirts of Paris earlier this month. Since then, we have seen pretty much everything that Emmanuel Macron taken into a different context. And of course, this project that he has of tackling separatist, radical Islam and so-called Islamist separatism becoming front and center of the political debate here in France, but also internationally.
Annelise, the next French presidential election isn't for another 2 years, 2022, but Macron has already been facing some pressure against his party, against the man that he stands to be on the ballot paper for the next election. Are these announcements that he's making surrounding Islam trying to win back voters from the far right?
Well, many will tell you yes, Oliver. Many people here in France believe that Emmanuel Macron is trying to charm voters on the right and on the far right with these ideas. Of course, those voters that tend to vote for Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National, that is the far-right party here in France that has been scoring relatively well in recent polls. These voters are interested in those ideas, in fighting, for example, terrorism, in the threat that radical Islam represents here in France. But of course, these ideas are very difficult to tackle. France has the biggest Muslim population in Western Europe, and many here in France believe that the government has again and again tried to use secularism in order to suppress these populations, in order to stigmatize these populations. And of course, that is part of the discourse of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Turkish president now has embraced this discourse to portray Emmanuel Macron as somehow the man who's trying to fight Islam, placing France against the religion. Of course, that is a very dangerous game, one that authorities here in France seem very concerned about. But for now, at least, Emmanuel Macron is adamant this is not a fight against Islam, this is a fight against radical ideas. Those ideas have no place in France. France is a country that respects belief, but also respects secularism and values freedom of expression.
Annelise, thanks. Annelise Borges, our international correspondent, joining us here from the French capital.